Hey guys, I'm Nguyen. I am a speech pathologist and a certified lactation counselor, coming at you from the Nursing Moms group. So here's a little taste of what you can see if you come to our Nursing Moms group. My priority with that group is getting moms connected with each other, finding moms that are in that same area of life that you are, to talk about the joys of nursing and the struggles of nursing, and then also give you a little taste of what may come next when they're nursing their older babies. So I do have a little bit to talk to you guys about today, about pumping. So this is something that I feel like I'm an expert in. I exclusively pumped with my first child because we weren't able to get a good latch, and so I know all about pumping and the hours and hours and hours that some moms will spend pumping. So first and foremost, flange sizing. So flange sizing is so important. If you have the wrong size flange when you're pumping, it can lead to irritation on the nipple or the areola. It can also lead to clogged ducts, and difficulty with milk removal, which will ultimately decrease your supply. So getting sized for the right size flange is very important. There are lots of ways you can do that. I can help you with that. You can also find rulers online that you can either print or order that will help you figure out the flange size. And so looking into that, don't do it while you're pregnant. Wait until you are actually nursing, because your nipples will change in size and in shape while you're nursing, and so that's an important thing to look out for. A lot of moms want to know when to start pumping, especially working moms with babies that are being exclusively breastfed from birth. They are planning to go back to work later, and when do we start that? So it's recommended that you exclusively breastfeed your baby for 6 weeks. That allows you to maintain a good breastfeeding relationship with them, perfect their latch, get your milk supply where it needs to be, and then after 6 weeks, things should be getting pretty routine and work pretty well, like a well-oiled machine. You and your baby will be by about 6 weeks, hopefully. And so then you can start introducing a pump session. Typically you want to pump after your first morning feed once you hit that 6 week mark. So baby wakes up in the morning, hopefully baby wakes up, that means they're sleeping for a longer period of time at night, not all the night, because they need to eat, but so you wake up with your baby, you feed your baby, and then you can pump a little bit. It doesn't, don't go into that with the expectation that you're gonna get a lot, because your body is gonna have to learn what it needs to do, but that's why we're introducing it a little bit early. Save that milk. You can put it in the freezer. There are tips for safe milk storage that I can give you, or you can find on the CDC's website, for how to store milk safely and how long it's good. So you can start building up that stash, and then as they get closer to needing to go to daycare or needing to be separated from you, you can adjust how often you're pumping if you need to make a little bit more. So when you go back to work, another question is, how often do I need to pump while I'm at work? And every single person is different. So I'm going to give you kind of a general idea, but what works for you and your baby is what's best. So if this doesn't work for you, if you say, oh wait, I don't do that, if what you're doing is working, don't change it. But if you do need advice on where to start and how to adjust that plan, typically you want to pump as many times as your baby would nurse. And so that can be really tricky if a mom is having to go back to work when their baby is very little, because we think about babies that are nursing every 1 to 2 hours when they're little bitty, and that's a lot different than maybe a 12-week-old baby who's nursing every maybe 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 hours. Everyone's schedule is different, and so think about what your baby needs, how often your baby would be nursing, and then try to pump with that schedule. So when I went back to work, I did a morning pump, like a mid-morning pump around 9:30ish. I pumped during my lunch break, and then I pumped one time in the afternoon around 2:30 or 3. And then that seems to work pretty well for moms who are breastfeeding, because then they can pick baby up from daycare around 5 or 5:30, nurse baby when they get baby, and then continue their nursing schedule during the evening. So storing milk at work. It is important to know, even though some colleagues may not know this, you can share this information with them. Breast milk is not considered a hazardous material like blood, so it can be stored in the refrigerator at work. Make sure it's, properly labeled. You don't want someone to think it's their coffee creamer. I prefer to keep mine inside of like a lunch bag in the fridge at work. But depending on what pump you use, what types of bottles you're using, your preferences, there are lots of different ways to store your milk at work. So you can pump directly into the bottle, put the lid on the bottle and put it in the fridge. There are bags that you can pump into the bag, put the lid on the bag and put that in the fridge, but these can all be put in the refrigerator at work. If you don't have a refrigerator at work, or if you are working a job that you're out in the field, and you aren't able to get a refrigerator, there are some things like, there is a thing called I know I'm going to say this wrong, a Ceres chill. It is almost like a frozen thermos that you can pour all of your breast milk into. There are other brands of that are kind of the same thing, but it's almost like a frozen thermos, so you can pour all of your breast milk into it throughout the day and bring it home. So just be aware that if you put freshly pumped breast milk into like a bag that maybe has like an ice pack or something, the warmth, breast milk is going to be about as warm as your body, and so the warmth of that might decrease the temperature of that bag. So just be aware that you're storing it safely and that it's cold enough to chill the milk. I also think it's really important to talk about what we're entitled to as nursing parents at work. So if you are working, your employer is required to accommodate your needs to nurse within some guidelines. So a non-exempt employee is what it says, is entitled to a reasonable break time to express milk. So the non-exempt employee can, the specifications of that can be found on, I think it's the CDC's website. I can maybe add like a link to that so you can double check and see what that means. But a non-exempt employee, so a workplace of less than 50 people is not required to give you that break time, but the reasonable break time, so they don't have to pay you for that. You may be required to clock out. You may be required to make up that time later, but they do have to provide that time for you. You are entitled to a private non-restroom place where you will not be disturbed. So your place of employment, as long as it's non-exempt, has to give you a place in the building that is private and not a bathroom for you to pump. And there's no limit to your right to pump. So if you need to express milk for 45 minutes 5 times a day, then you do what you need to do. Your workplace, again, can ask you to clock out or make up that time, but you are entitled to all the time that you need to pump milk. So just a few tips before we end here. Make a plan and be familiar with your pumping space before your first pumping session, especially if you have time constraints. So going in and being able to say, okay, like this is where I'm gonna put my chair. I have this table here. I can plug my pump in here. I need a table in here. Knowing what you need. So making that plan, knowing what you need, knowing where the outlet is. Also know if you're going to share the space with other employees who may be pumping, and know how to schedule that. Make sure there's a lock or a way to close that door so that you're not disturbed during your pumping session. So that is kind of some general information about pumping. If you have any more questions about pumping or breastfeeding or anything like that, I would love, love, love to get to know you. Come to our Nursing Moms group and get to know other moms, and we'll see you soon.
I have a question. Can you increase your supply by pumping on one side while your baby's feeding on the other?
Yes, you can.
Would that be beneficial?
So if you have supply concerns, if you're not able to produce as much, then that can be beneficial. Something to be cautious of is when you are pumping on one side and your baby is feeding on one side, that may tell your body you're nursing twins. And so that may then give you oversupply. So some people, exclusive pumpers, I had an oversupply, and because I was not breastfeeding my baby, my oversupply didn't bother me. I got to throw it into the freezer and use it later. An oversupply when you're nursing can be difficult because it can give your baby too forceful of milk. The milk can let down too forcefully, or it can make it difficult for them to get all of the nutrients every time they're eating. And so if there's concerns with supply, sometimes we can recommend that, but I wouldn't recommend that if your supply is appropriate. That was a good question. Thanks. Any other questions? All right, thank you guys.